a trust was established to preserve the home and studio of American sculptor Lawrence Tenney Stevens. At the time of his death in 1972, he was survived by his wife Bee, 30 years his junior, and 4 children. Bee has dedicated the remaining years of her life to preserving almost all of his business and personal files and a lifetime accumulation of models, sketches, art, and artifacts. Through her efforts, the Stevens estate is one of the most complete examples of the history of American sculpture to survive. Lawrence Tenney Stevens was born in Boston in 1896. He was raised, educated, and launched his successful career during the first 3 decades of the 20th century, the period widely recognized as the most influential in the development of American sculpture. Stevens showed appreciable talent at an early age. The inspiration for this piece came from reading a book on Rodin, who had created his famous sculpture, The Thinker, just 7 years before Stevens was born. Stevens, only 17, found this piece of Carrara marble, the type Michelangelo preferred, at a stone company. He had never carved in marble and had no tools, so he made sketches of some that he had seen and sent them to a blacksmith friend. As we can see, they worked well, but Rodin's style of leaving raw block was not to Stevens' liking, so this is the only piece of its type that he created. While a junior in high school, he demonstrated such natural facility that for the first time, the art supervisor for the entire Boston school district successfully lobbied the board to pay for off-campus classes. As a result, Stevens enrolled in evening classes with adults, taught by Harvard's John Wilson. As a senior, Stevens was voted most likely to become famous in his chosen profession. When asked to speak at graduation exercises, he selected as his topic the making of a public monument. Word of the speech came to the attention of sculptor Cyrus Darlin, who sent a warm invitation for Stevens to visit his Arlington studio. Darlin recommended that he apply immediately to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts School. There, Stevens won a full scholarship, studying under Bela Pratt. During this period, American sculptors were beginning to sever their ties with European traditionalism. Many began to experiment, electing to distort the proportions of their subject for the sake of drama and style. Stevens felt style could be better achieved through selective simplification, and that no sacrifice in form was required. To learn exactly how far he could simplify before cutting into or exaggerating the underlying structure, Stevens enrolled at Tufts Medical School to study anatomy. This led to his lifelong practice of first modeling his subjects nude, then applying the minimum amount of clay necessary to suggest clothing. This piece, a fine example, was commissioned in 1930 by the Fairmount Park Arts Association for placement in front of the Harrison Laboratory at the University of Pennsylvania. It's of John Harrison, America's first chemical industrialist. Stevens began receiving commissions even as a student. What he considered to be his first significant commission is represented here in a recently created sketch taken from his description. It was purchased by the wealthy merchant Franklin Beebe for the home he was building on Beacon Hill. The whereabouts of this piece is unknown. With the outbreak of the First World War, Stevens felt it his duty to suspend his studies in order to accept a commission in the army. There he capitalized on his artistic skills. He proposed, and was granted authority, to create a miniature battlefield on 1 acre of land, designed to train artillery officers. He created trees, roads, buildings, hills, and trenches to scale, allowing officers to gain experience in sighting their targets without having to fire their 18-inch shells. This idea saved the Army so much money, it led to Stevens' rapid promotion to first lieutenant. After the war, Stevens was discharged through Corpus Christi, Texas. When he returned, Bela Pratt was dead. His new instructor was the noted sculptor Charles Gravely. Gravely admired Stevens, and the two became good friends, which may in part explain why we find him here, in heroic scale, in Gravely's finest piece, the General George Meade Memorial in Washington, D.C. Stevens wrote of Gravely, "He felt, as the great artists always have, that surface and style are the individual's development, but the construction is a scientific matter which can be taught, and it is the construction which is obviously there in all great art, no matter what outward differences due to culture are evident." In his 4th complete year at the museum school, Harold Woodbury Parsons suggested that Stevens enter the world's most prestigious competition, the Prix de Rome. The winner would receive a 3-year scholarship to the American Academy in Rome. Paul Manship secured this honor in 1909. Stevens entered with this beautiful piece, a tribute to heroism. It won him praise from the jury and honorable mention. The first prize was awarded to Edmund Amateus, who became a lifelong friend of Stevens. Encouraged by the judges, and knowing this was the second attempt by Amateus, Stevens decided to try again the following year. The secretary of the Academy suggested Stevens contact the Tiffany Foundation before returning to finish his last year at the museum school. The foundation was established by Louis Comfort Tiffany to benefit the most promising artists of the day. Stevens was one of 15 given a fellowship which was usually for a month, but Stevens was invited to stay until school started. While there at the foundation, he got to know the sculptor Sterling Calder, who was at that time associated with the Art Nouveau movement. Stevens created this piece, the Tiffany Bull, which the foundation requested for their permanent collection. Back at the museum school, Stevens intensified his efforts with evening classes at the Massachusetts Normal Art School, studying under Ernest Major. Gravely was enthusiastic about Stevens' bid for the Prix de Rome. The two would regularly lunch at a favorite Chinese restaurant, where Gravely told Stevens, "There are many things I can tell you here across the table that I cannot in class." Stevens wanted to know, in his words, what made the art world tick in America. So Gravely prepared letters of introduction to the most esteemed sculptors in the nation. That winter, Stevens was welcomed into the studios of French, Weinman, Fraser, Manship, Genuine, McNeil, Bartlett, MacMonnies, and others. Stevens felt he could not be more prepared for competition. Finally, he began the series of events designed to narrow the field and ended up one of 3 to make it to the final phase. The competitors were sent to New York and each given a studio at the National Academy of Design. They had 1 month to create their final entry. Competition from Wheeler Williams and a young man known as Law was fierce. It was a janitor who alerted Stevens to the fact that Williams and Law had bored a hole through the wall of an empty adjoining studio to view his work. According to the janitor, they would sneak in every day to check on his progress, hoping to gain some competitive advantage. What they didn't know is that Stevens had decided to concentrate on the basic form for most of the month, meaning that it would look very rough until the last 2 days of the event. Then, because of Stevens' natural facility, he was able to very quickly finish the surface. The two were shocked when the jury, chaired by Daniel Chester French, awarded Williams second place and declared Lawrence Tenney Stevens the winner of the 1922 Prix de Rome. He was the first Bostonian to win such an honor, and the newspapers had a field day. Before heading to Rome, Stevens accepted another invitation to Tiffany's. With all the publicity came an increase in commissions, and his stay at the foundation was cut short when he was viewed as a professional and no longer qualified as a student. Soon Stevens was off to Rome, where he took full advantage of his years at the academy with intense study and extensive travel. The status surrounding his win opened doors throughout Italy and Greece to important sites that were rarely made available to others. Having the opportunity to examine the art treasures of the world firsthand only whet his tremendous appetite for exploration. This polar bear in the Newark Museum is one of 6 small animal bronzes Stevens created at the Academy to finance further expeditions. With the discovery of King Tut's tomb in late 1922, Stevens left with a friend, Alfred Flogel, who had won the Prix de Rome as a painter. Accompanied by an historian, they headed to Egypt. Their travels are well documented in this 27-page article written by Stevens and published in July of 1923. Stevens made sketches and, when possible, charcoal rubbings of precious artifacts. Here he saw the most impressive bas-reliefs in the world, which had an enormous impact on future commissions. Clearly, this trip solidified Stevens' simplistic style, but he was not the only one influenced. It was the Academy's policy to have open studios, so visiting artists from around the world could, and did, drop in. The idea was to encourage a free exchange of information. Though it may never be known to what extent, it is a certainty that the many who visited Stevens' studio and Flogel's were affected. By the mid-20s, stylized animal motifs based on pieces unearthed from Tut's tomb were widely incorporated in Art Deco design. Of further credit to the Academy was their emphasis on collaboration to achieve unity. As a graduation requirement, painters, sculptors, and architects, both building and landscape, had to jointly prepare a yearly project. This had an enormous impact on the spread of what was then considered a design ensemble. As these students graduated and returned to the United States, others looked to them for design inspiration. It naturally followed that the more you grasped while you were there, the more you would bring back. And Stevens planned to bring back all he could. Though he was required to complete only one project a year, Stevens worked prodigiously. He became so focused that he began to resent the distractions that accompanied his status. He wrote to his family that Italy's King Victor Emmanuel was to drop by the Academy in the coming weeks. While others were busy trying to ready themselves for this grand occasion, Stevens continued his work. He told his mother and father he couldn't wait until this was over so that everyone and everything could get back to normal. He was working on this piece, Italian Falcon, when it was announced that the king was on his way. It was to have had a black marble base, but he had not yet ordered it, so, in haste, he painted the bottom portion with black lacquer and put it on the table, inconspicuously with the other pieces. Betty Alden, the society writer for the Boston Evening American, best summarized the humorous incident that followed. The visitors to Stevens' studio resembled an international who's who. When they left, it was back to work or travel. While at the Academy, Stevens set aside a month each year to attend lectures by the famed French sculptor Émile Antoine Bourdelle. France at that time fancied itself as the world's cultural center. Its International Exposition of the Decorative Arts was held in Paris in 1925. The rules specified that exhibits were to feature what they called modernism, but modernism was not yet known in America, so it declined to participate. Stevens was the first sculptor to graduate from the Academy and return to the United States after the 1925 Paris Exposition. Family, friends, artists, and critics anxiously awaited his first exhibits. They were not disappointed.
I've got a really neat to do. John Fabian joins us now. He's the kind of the co-curator of this exhibit. Tell us about who this is and why it's so wonderful.
Well, this is American sculptor Lawrence Tenney Stevens, born in the late 1800s, and this is the first time all of his works have ever been publicly displayed in one spot. And we're very, very excited about it.
Now, he actually lived here in Tempe. Tell us about that.
That's true. He spent the last 15 years of his life here in Tempe, but he was a lot more than just a local artist. He was known internationally from the 1920s on.
And we also have a piece of his that is pretty neat and is going to a very big place after this.
It's very exciting. It's a piece created in the 1920s while he was a student at the American Academy in Rome. We discovered it at the Smithsonian. They weren't aware they had it until we mounted this exhibit, and they like it so much they believe that they'll place it on permanent display when it's returned to them after this exhibit.
Well, this goes through July. This is a really neat exhibit, all kinds of bronze. If you like cowboys, if you like just art in general, it's a great thing.
Fabulous. Actually, this is the first time most of the public will have the opportunity to see this rare collection of one-of-a-kind bronzes celebrating the American Rodeo Series.
All right, there you go. Whether you're a cowboy art lover, whatever, the Tempe Historical Museum and this art exhibit, it's something to do.
The exhibit is on display at the Tempe Historical Museum at Rural and Southern. The museum is open Monday through Thursday and Saturdays from 10 until 5, and on Sundays from 1 until 5. It is closed on Fridays.
A special event is planned for this